we are more constrained by the availability of our willpower than we are by the hours in a day. I'm somebody who wants to do a lot of things, everything, from building a company to working out, to learning languages, traveling, all kinds of stuff. And over the past 3 years, I think I've been able to start doing that pretty much. And that's been a lot of fun. It's been incredibly rewarding for me. But it's been a tough challenge, kind of finding time to mix everything in. And there have been times when, those things have become mixed up in my priorities, whether it's too much traveling or too much work or just, it's hard. And I wanted to speak a little bit on how I have come to manage and juggle all those balls, because I've been running a software company for the past 3 years now. And, I've been learning a lot of basically about how I can better organize my things. And so this is just my take on what's a better way to kind of organize work and things so that everything gets done. Things stop slipping through the cracks. That was a big one for me that happens super often. It's like these little important tasks that I forgot to do. And like I basically came up with some really simple systems that I think got me a really long way. And so I wanted to kind of share a little on those. I'll start by saying like the simple to-do lists are the stuff that scales the best. Like the simple things, it's not the fancy things. Usually you just have to find kind of what works for you and then just stick with that. And to find what works for you, you have to kind of try, test and sample a lot. To speak specifically on basically how I make time for everything, the way I manage my time nowadays. And like I can get incredibly busy sometimes. In fact, today I have like 10 back-to-back meetings, and one of them ended a little bit early, and I'm recording this now between meetings. And one of the first things that has made a huge difference, and this being a very recent thing, is I have packed meetings into specific days. So I try and pack as many meetings as possible into Tuesdays, and I will block out half-hour slots for calls, and I just do this back-to-back, like no buffer time in between. I will try and block out 10 blocks, whatever it is, as many calls as I can. I'll jam-pack them into Tuesdays, and whatever doesn't fit into a Tuesday will go on a Thursday. That is what I do for like 90% of my calls. If a client specifically wants a Wednesday or a Friday or whatever, of course, I'm happy to make that exception. But even then, like if it's a first time meeting, I'll do the time they schedule. But after that, I'll typically propose Tuesdays or Thursdays, whatever is best. And I usually try and do it in the afternoon. And I fill my day from bottom up and trying to have as few gaps as possible. That's one of the big things which helps me, because that means like I then have time for focus work and everything else that I want to do kind of uninterrupted. One of the things which I think for me is the most annoying is when I have calls scattered all throughout my week. So that is one of the things which I do super, super helpful. Number two, I would say, is about keeping like a simple to-do list that I have to update on a daily basis. I don't want something that updates by itself. I want to do it myself, because that forces me to acknowledge like what I have to do today versus tomorrow. This is one of the reasons that people are like very big fans of notebooks and things that you have to write manually, because it forces you to kind of go through things. Now, in my opinion, I like to use Notion because like it's just for me, for transport, it's on my computer or my phone, whatever, super easy. But the way I do it, I run it like a to-do list that I had in my notebook. So the way I used to do things was I'd write the day and I'd write a bunch of to-do lists, like a bunch of tasks, I should say. And then, the next day I'd write whatever I had to do, which I'd often copy from the last day. And so when I decided to implement this on Notion, I basically made like a calendar database, and you can view that like per day, basically. And what I do is when I complete, like at the end of the day, I will just shift whatever I haven't done. I will drag and drop that card into the next day. And I do that every day. And I don't want it to be automated. I like doing it manually. That's manual by design. And that is really, really good for just the everyday things to not slip in the cracks. And another thing that has been very recent, but Notion Calendar integrates with Notion databases. This is one of the things that I like. So basically, I can show this. So you can see up here, basically the things that I have on my to-do list are at the top. And those things I then drag and drop into my day to like block out when I'm probably going to do the task. Now, I don't always stick 100% to time blocking. I'm not the best at it, but it means that like I can at least estimate, let's say I have 5 tasks and I drag them all into my day, and I see that 2 of them are going to be big chunks of time and I'm not going to have time to finish that thing. Then I know that like, I'm not going to get all this done today. I might as well start dragging stuff into the next day. And I also like, I not color code, but I use emojis to indicate like what's operational necessities versus like fundamentally core important work. And that helps me as well keep in mind just like what's important and what's what, but it's not, I wouldn't say that's like one of the biggest changes I've made. That's like a relatively marginal change, but it is nice to be able to visualize your tasks and then drag them into the hours at which you want to complete them. And I'll say that, doing that on a consistent basis has been super, super helpful, because it just means that every day I'm acknowledging the things that I keep on that to-do list and what I need to do next. That means that things don't slip through the cracks, and I can schedule stuff super in advance. So if I want to schedule something it's not super in advance, but let's say 3 weeks from now, I drop it in and I know I'll eventually see that task pop up again. Whereas I couldn't do that with a notebook to-do list. Yeah. I'll say as well, like the third thing I would say is for bigger picture goals, I like on a weekly basis, I revisit these goals and I just look at them and I say, okay, I write down what the goal is. Bear in mind, I'm talking about yearly goals. So every week I write down the same thing. And then I look at, okay, what's the constraint to that goal and how am I making action toward that thing? And so, I just do that on a consistent basis and make sure that my to-do list lines up with those goals. And so that helps also not let stuff slip through the cracks. And, I think before I would set goals, but I'd forget about them, which is, it's effectively useless. So I did that for a long time. Now I'm going to jump into this call and then continue recording this later. Anyway, continue where I left off from. One of the key things that I think makes the whole thing come together is constantly revisiting the idea of evaluating whether something is worth your time or not. And what I mean by that is like, really think if that task that's on your to-do list is contributing toward the ultimate kind of life and thing that you want overall. And so by doing that, you can eliminate the things that do not contribute to your overall goals and ultimate kind of like picture. And I think I recommend making that picture based on like, what is a good day-to-day that you really enjoy? And then you can start to make time for everything. And I think another thing that has really helped is like find environments where you enjoy doing the things, like make yourself enjoy doing things. It's actually less about finding time for things. It's more about finding energy to do things, to do everything is the hard part. It's not just about a physical constraint of time. It's not about the 24 hours in a day that you have. It's about the limited amount of energy and willpower that you have to dedicate toward things. You have a limited amount of energy that you can expend on like chores. What I mean by chores is tasks that require you to expend energy to complete them. And the opposite of a chore is basically something that you can do, which kind of feels good or feels very easy to do. Like you can turn exercise from a chore into something that feels easy to do if you find an exercise that you really enjoy. So let's say that you hate calisthenics or you hate weightlifting, but you really enjoy swimming. So if you just focus on doing swimming, then it becomes something that re-energizes you. And those are the things which are really worth finding, because it's not about finding time, it's about finding energy. And if you find lower energy cost replacements to things, man, that could take you really far. One of the things which I enjoy doing is just learning about random things. I'm a very curious person. And I realized recently, like I haven't been learning about random topics as much as I used to. And I really enjoy that. And so one of the things I started doing is I just started taking up documentaries. And so, like I reached the end of my workday and I'll watch a documentary about Caligula, the third Roman emperor. And it's interesting to me. And I like watching videos. I'm big on videos. I've been big on videos for the longest time. I studied pretty advanced chemistry for 14-year-old that I was at the time over a summer. And I did that on Crash Course, which is like this YouTube channel. And I loved it. And it's because like I find that medium engaging for me. If it's books for you, if it's audio podcast, whatever it is, doesn't matter. But you have to find the thing that for you brings the most energy. And I applied the same logic to like sport. So when I found that doing exercise was becoming a chore, what I realized is like you don't need more willpower or to better time block things in your calendar. You just need to figure out how do you make that thing fun? Like how do you make it fundamentally so that it is not something that you hate looking. You like look at your calendar, you see that you have to do it, and you're like, man, I really wish I didn't have to do that. Like if that's the case, then you got to figure out what's the replacement that achieves the same goal but costs you less energy. How can you make things cost you less energy? That is a big question that I go back to pretty often. And so I focus on, keeping my to-do list kind of as lean as possible and focused on the things that really push the business forward. And I try and expend that kind of energy on, I try and be very careful about how I allocate that energy. And for the rest of the goals that I have, I try and, it's like, how can I make this the lowest energy cost to me possible? And that I think has been a really, really useful frame of thought to make time for everything that I want to do. It's not about making time, it's about making energy. How do you allocate all of that kind of across the board? That's a really, really useful idea. That's helped me a lot. And as somebody who has a lot of things on their plate and a lot of things to worry about, it's just, for me, it's a combination of the task organization where like I know that I have everything in this one repository of places. Like I could not live without my calendar and without my to-do list. Like I live and die by those two things. That helps me organize and make sure things don't fall through the cracks. If somebody needs me to do something, it goes on that to-do list. I don't care like if it's personal, if it's work related, if it's to do with like literally cleaning the doormat, like I don't care. It has to be on that to-do list so it doesn't fall through the cracks. And if it's not there, I'm not going to commit to doing it. And then the other side of that is like do things manually and repeat your goals to make sure that you're aligning with that ultimate kind of thing. And budget your energy. Don't budget your time, because time tends to not be the constraint. And I think that's been a really, really useful idea. That's like transformed how I allocate, things in my day and gotten me to be able to do way more of the stuff that I really enjoy doing. And yeah, overall, it's just results in way better quality of life for me. That's just my experience. That's just my 2 cents. And who knows, maybe if people find it useful, they can give it a try as well. But yeah, as usual, drop comments if you have questions or anything about how I think about other things or about the particular routines that I do. I do read those and try and answer as much as possible.